It's a quick video on the reciprocal trig function. So you guys know sine of theta and cosine of theta and tangent of theta. And just a quick reminder, we learned not too long ago that tangent of theta is the same thing as sine over cosine. So those are 3 of the 6 trig functions. And we know that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent, of course, is opposite over adjacent, but it's probably just as easy to remember that it's sine over cosine. So the 3 reciprocal trig functions are called reciprocal functions because they're reciprocal of sine, cosine, and tangent. And if you remember reciprocal, that means a fraction flipped over. So for example, 2/3, the reciprocal of 2/3 would be 3/2. So we have secant of theta, cosecant of theta, and cotangent of theta. So the secant of theta is the reciprocal of cosine, so that'd be 1 over cosine of theta. Cosecant is 1 over sine of theta, and cotangent is 1 over tangent of theta, or otherwise known as, if we flip sine and cosine over, or if we flip this tangent over, that would be cosine theta over sine theta. So that's the reciprocal functions. These are 3 new functions that you have to commit to memory. And now suddenly your world is opened up to you, because I could ask you what the cosecant of 5 pi over 4 is. And since you've been practicing your unit circle stuff, you know that 5 pi over 4 is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's a 45, 45, 90 triangle. And cosecant is going to be 1 over the sine. So sine would be negative 1 over rad 2. Of course, that's a fraction within a fraction. So if we flip it over and multiply, we get negative square root of 2. If I asked you for what the cotangent of 90 degrees is, well, you would go, oh, it's right there. Those 2 coordinates are 0 and 1. And since cotangent is cosine over sine, that would be 0 over 1, which would be 0. So you can see, knowing these relationships, I can find all the other ones. Likewise, if I know that, for example, sine of theta is equal to 3/5, and I want to find, and cosine of theta is less than 0, so that immediately tells me that sine is positive, cosine is negative, must be in the second quadrant, right? And I want to find what cosine of theta is, tangent of theta, what tangent of theta is, what secant of theta is, cosecant of theta, and cotangent of theta. Well, if we draw the reference triangle again, like we did in the last video, we call this theta, we call that 3, call that 5. If we use Pythagorean theorem, we can find out this has to be 4. And we can, once we get those numbers, we can just start filling it in. So cosine is going to be 4/5, but it's negative because cosine is less than 0. Tangent's going to be 3/4. It's also negative because when cosine is negative and sine is positive, tangent has to be negative, or we know that tangent is negative in the second quadrant. Now, once we get those 2, these fall into place quite nicely, because secant is just cosine flipped over, so that'd be negative 5/4. Cosecant is just sine flipped over, so that'd be 5/3. And cotangent is just tangent flipped over, so that'd be negative 4/3. And that is the reciprocal functions. Thanks for watching.